Here's a video on factoring trinomials using the traditional AC method. As a reminder, all quadratic trinomials can be written in standard form, which would be ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is the coefficient or the number multiplied by the x squared term, b is the coefficient of the x to the first power term, and c is your constant. In this example, we have to factor 8x squared plus 2x plus minus 3. So our a value would be positive 8 since it's multiplied by x squared. Our b value would be positive 2 since it's multiplied by the x term. And the constant is negative 3, the minus 3 at the end. Our first step would be to see if we have any greatest common factor that we could divide out of all these terms. In this case, there is no greatest common factor that you could divide out, so we're going to continue on. But just be aware that that should be the first thing on your mind. Is there a greatest common factor? And if so, factor that out. The next step would be to take the a value and multiply it by the c value. So our a value of 8 in this case is multiplied by our c value of negative 3 to form a product of negative 24. And the next step would be to identify all pairs of integers that multiply to be negative 24. So 1 times negative 24 would work. Negative 1 times positive 24 would work. 2 times negative 12 would work. Negative 2 times positive 12 would work. 3 times negative 8 would work. Negative 3 times positive 8 would work. 4 times negative 6 would work, so would negative 4 times a positive 6. And then you want to think about if there are any other cases where you have, integers that multiply to be a negative 24. I think we have a pretty good extensive list right now. And now what you're doing in the next step is you're working through the pairs to see which of those pair of numbers also add to be the b value, which in this case is a 2. So we want to go through the pair of numbers and see which also add to be a positive 2. And these are not going to work. However, when you get down to 4 and negative 6, 4 plus a negative 6 would be a negative 2. However, negative 4 plus 6 would work, and that would be a positive 2. So that's going to be the pair of numbers that we're going to use. So we're going to remember that pair of numbers. The rest we could erase because they're not useful. We're going to use the integers negative 4 and positive 6. And we're going to rewrite this middle term using those numbers. So the 8x squared comes down as is. However, I'm going to break apart the middle term and I'm going to use the two integers I found. And I'm going to put the positive 6x first. So I'm going to put positive 6x and then I'm going to put minus 4x. And then the minus 3, the constant, comes down as is. If I was to take 6x and subtract off 4x, they're like terms, so I could do that and that would come out as that middle term of 2x. That's how I know that it shows the right pair of integers. And our next step would be to use the method known as, or the strategy, factor by grouping. And we're going to look at the first two terms first. 8x squared plus 6x. And I'm going to take out the greatest common factor. I know that I could divide out a 2 out of all those terms. And I also can divide out an x to the first power term. I have in the first term here an x squared, in the second term I have an x. So I know that I can definitely divide out the lower power of x. So that would be a 2x. And then I'm going to open parentheses to put what remains. 8x squared is going to be divided by 2x, and that would be a 4x. Remember the rule for the quotient rule. Keep the variable or the base and subtract the exponents. And then 6x divided by 2x would be a positive 3. And now I'm going to come along and look at my next two terms. my last two terms, which are minus 4x minus 3. And I'm definitely able to divide out of these terms. I'm able to divide out a 1, but let's make it a negative 1 to make this easier. So I'm going to divide out a negative 1. Negative 4x is divided by that negative 1, which is the GCF, so that would be a positive 4x. Negative 3 divided by negative 1 would be a positive 3, so it's going to be 4x plus 3. And what you notice is that it's no coincidence how you have a same binomial in parentheses. That's the common binomial, so that's going to come down, and that is definitely one of the factors. And the other factor is formed by merging together the GCF, the 2x, which was the GCF of the first pair, and the minus 1 from the GCF of the second pair. And I'm going to circle my answer. These are my factors that multiply to form the quadratic trinomial 8x squared plus 2x minus 3.